How's it going, everybody? I'm Steve, aka Steve Ninja, and welcome to my channel. So tonight I'm going to provide my top 25, I guess you can say, horror movies or just scary movies, just movies that I really love to watch. Apparently, Tim Talkies had he was doing a top 25 horror movies, and apparently the deadline was Wednesday night at midnight, and I just found that out today. Actually, as I was putting this list together, and I thought, well, I'm going to do it anyway, just because this is so much fun. And last year I actually did this like 3 times. The list just kept changing. My top 10 changes all the time, so it's some of these movies are probably not even considered to be horror to some people. I don't know, but it all depends. I encourage people to give me their top 10 or top 20 or top 25. This is all just for fun, so it's not definitive for anything. Some people may have their list completely different. Some of these movies, like I say, may not even make their list. But I'm going to go through these kind of quickly because I don't want this video to go too long. Okay, so kicking things off, this one at number 25 is I love the original. I hated part 2, but the movie is The Exorcist 3. George C. Scott has a Brad Dourif in it. Amazing. And obviously, I'm going to show this. I'm going to show the box, and I'm also going to show like the movie poster in the middle. I think people that are watching on their phones can see it much better when it's like a full screen there. Let me know in the comments. I haven't really gotten any feedback from anybody if they like that where it's in the middle of the screen. But I like doing that. Just like if you're watching on your phone, you can see it much better. But so number 24, this one's a classic werewolf movie. It's not the main werewolf movie. It's the other one. It's The Howling. Great movie. It's Rob Bottin did the effects on this. Rick Baker started out working on it, and then Rob Bottin took over his apprentice, basically. At number 23, this one, I love watching this once a year. I think it was filmed in Canada originally. The movie is My Bloody Valentine. Love this one. So at number 22, this one is Fright Night. I love the original. Hated part 2. Hated the remake. Hated the part 2 to the remake. Hated that, but love the original though. So at 21, this one's directed by David Cronenberg, released in 1986. The movie is The Fly. Jeff Goldblum's amazing in this movie. So at number 20, this one was released in 1996 from Wes Craven. Definitely the shot in the arm that horror needed at the time. The movie is Scream. So at number 19, this one's directed by George Romero and written by Stephen King. It is Creepshow. So at number 18, this one's directed by Alfred Hitchcock. It's Psycho, released in 1960. Definitely kind of an influence on slasher movies. So at number 17, we have The Evil Dead. This is directed by Sam Raimi, starring Bruce Campbell. Kicked off a franchise. It's a classic. So at number 16, this one's directed by Brian De Palma, starring Sissy Spacek. It is Carrie, written by Stephen King. So at number 15, I have Rosemary's Baby. Obviously, it's a foundational horror, directed by Roman Polanski, released in 1968. So at number 14, I have The Return of the Living Dead. This is definitely different from George Romero's zombie movies. Directed by Dan O'Bannon. He'll show up again later on as far as he directed and did the screenplay to it. It also involves John Russo that he worked on like Night of the Living Dead and that kind of thing with George Romero. So at number 13, I have Evil Dead 2, directed by Sam Raimi, starring Bruce Campbell again. I kind of like this a little bit more than the original. It obviously brought some humor into the movie, so it's the first one's really more of a pure horror movie, but love the sequel as well. So at number 12, I have the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, directed by Tobe Hooper. You'll see Tobe Hooper again later on my list, but it's definitely a foundational kind of horror movie for sure. So at number 11, I have The Exorcist. This one definitely could be in my top 10. I just missed it, just barely. I think for me, I definitely love to watch the last 30 minutes of this movie for sure. I think that's definitely iconic horror for sure. It's just kind of a slow build, kind of getting up to that point. This movie's almost 50 years old now, released in 1973. So it's definitely foundational horror and definitely a classic. So at number 10, I have Night of the Living Dead. This is directed by George Romero, released in 1968. It definitely started the zombie craze, but I think that didn't really take off until like 10 years later. But it's definitely all started from this movie. So at number 9, I have An American Werewolf in London. This is directed by John Landis. The Oscars actually made a special category for Rick Baker because of his makeup effects in this movie. So I actually watched this movie last night. So it's a movie that I have to watch like once a year, and it never gets old for me. So at number 8, I have Poltergeist, another Tobe Hooper movie, written by Steven Spielberg, and it definitely has his touch on it. Some people actually kind of think he directed a lot of this movie, which kind of looks like it for sure. But since he wrote it, it definitely has his influence on it. So at number 7, this one, some people may not consider this to be a horror movie. It's kind of considered to be like a thriller horror movie, but the movie is The Silence of the Lambs. Hannibal Lecter, Buffalo Bill. To me, it has enough horror elements in it to make it a horror movie, and I definitely find it scary. It's definitely an eerie kind of movie, and so it's definitely kind of a mainstream movie. So that's why a lot of people probably wouldn't put it in their top 25, but I consider it to be it's a top 10 kind of movie for me. So at number 6, I have Dawn of the Dead. This is directed by George Romero. It was released overseas in 1978, but released in the U.S. in 1979. And tomorrow night, I'm actually going to see this in 3D for the first time ever on the big screen. Can't wait to do that. If you see the poster here, it's showing at Regal Cinemas only. It's exclusively from October 28th through the 31st, so I can't wait to watch that on the big screen for the first time. So number 5, I have Jaws. This is probably my second favorite movie of all time. I watch this at least once a year, sometimes twice a year. So some people may not consider this to be a pure horror movie, but definitely scary for sure. So at number 4, I have Halloween, John Carpenter's 1978 classic. Definitely started like the modern slasher movies. Even though you can say there were slasher movies before this, but it definitely spawned the 1980s. Definitely slasher movies were all over the place at the time. This is like the 35th anniversary. It has a special featurette where Jamie Lee Curtis did, like, from what I understand, it's like the only convention she's ever done. And it's in Indianapolis, where I live, and here, so it's pretty special for me to watch this. So. Okay, so we're in the top 3 now. So at number 3, this one is Alien. It says, directed by Ridley Scott from 1979. Starring Sigourney Weaver. Definitely, I think the original is definitely more of a horror movie than Part 2, which I really love Part 2 as well. But that movie's kind of more of an action movie with some horror in it as well. But love the original. So at number 2, I have The Thing, starring Kurt Russell. It's directed by John Carpenter. At one time, my top 10 John Carpenter, that I had this one at like number 3, but my top 3 in John Carpenter can kind of go in any order, but today I have this at number 2. So, okay, at number 1, I have The Shining from Stanley Kubrick, Jack Nicholson. It has Shelley Duvall. It was written by Stephen King, even though he doesn't really like what Stanley Kubrick did to his story, but overall, I think this very chilling kind of movie, very great horror. This movie kind of goes up and down on my list as far as horror movies, but today I've got it at number 1, though. Okay, that's it. So, like I said, please give me your top 10 in the comments. Let me know. Like I said, my list is definitely not the definitive list. Some people may not have some of these movies even listed in their top 25, which is fine. Like if you give me a top 10 or top 20, top 25, that'd be great. Please put a like on the video, and please consider subscribing, and have a good day.